Okay, thank you. So very warm welcome to this evening's event on nature-friendly gardening. It's great to see so many people here. This event coincides with the RHS National Gardening Week, and it's also obviously the start of the outdoor season for most of us. Hopefully a chance to get out in the garden subject to the vagaries of the Cumbrian weather, so we'll hope for the best. We had some rain today, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. I'm Nigel Jenkins, and I'm a part of the staff team at Cumbria Action for Sustainability, and I'm also part of the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership. That's a partnership of more than 80 organisations which has a target of achieving net zero for our county by 2037. So what's the connection between climate change and gardens and outdoor spaces? So private gardens in Britain are estimated to cover an area which is actually bigger than all of our country's nature reserves combined, estimated to be over 10 million acres. So that's a massive amount of space, and the small changes that we can all make at home in our gardens or our backyards, even our window box, cumulatively makes a huge difference. Gardens have a huge role to play in the responses to climate change. So that's everything from things like carbon capture, through to how we manage water, how we capture water, how we prevent floods, how we can grow food, how we can improve air quality, all sorts of ways in which gardens play a part in our response to the climate emergency and the nature recovery. And ideally, changes that we can make, the things we do at our local level at home, they meet in the middle somewhere with larger scale changes in other habitats. So everything from parklands and rivers and coastlines, and of course agriculture. If all of these join up, then really help to improve nature generally, improve biodiversity, and encourage nature. So I'm delighted to welcome our guest speakers this evening. We've got contributors from Garden Organic and from Cumbria Wildlife Trust, and they'll each be talking for about 15 minutes on their particular area of expertise. We'll first be hearing about what we can do on soil quality, and then we'll be hearing about habitat and biodiversity, and then we'll go on to home composting. So on that note, I would encourage you to use the chat during the course of the event. You're welcome to put questions and comments. We'll do our best to answer some of those questions at the end, and also we will take the chat, and if there are questions we can answer afterwards, try and do that for follow-ups. So first of all, I'm keen to welcome Dr. Anton Rosenfeld from Garden Organic, who'll be talking about 3 steps to soil health. So I'll stop sharing and just hand over to Anton. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll just share my screen and then we can get on our way. Really good to be here this evening with such a good crowd as well. It's really encouraging that so many people are interested. So I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of soil health. We all realise how important soil is in terms of climate change and food production. So I'm going to just show you sort of 3 small steps that you can make in your own garden. So just a little bit about where I'm from. I'm from Garden Organic. We are a national charity. We have just over 20,000 members. We've been around since the late 1950s, and our main mission is to get as many people growing organically as possible. So have a look on our website and see some of the things that we get up to. So a few soil facts. Obviously soil is really vital in our food production. Depends how you look at the statistics, but some say that 95% of food depends on the soil. I'd say perhaps even a little bit more than that if you look at it indirectly. It's also very important in biodiversity. It hosts almost a quarter of all terrestrial species. So soil is alive. That's something we really need to remember. It's not just a sort of inert growing medium. And it's really vital for as a store of carbon. And we always think about sort of carbon that's stored in sort of rainforest and trees, but actually most of it's beneath our feet. So it's about 75% of terrestrial carbon is stored in the soil. So that's about 3 times as much as is stored in trees and plants. So it really is very vital in terms of climate change. So what can you do in your own garden? You sort of might feel a little bit sort of quite insignificant when you think of sort of globally what you can do in your small patch in your garden, but there is quite a lot of things you can do. And there's 3 sort of simple actions you can take for a healthier soil in your garden. So the first one is adding organic matter. That really is a sort of win-win in terms of soil health, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. Avoiding bare soil, that's something we really, really want to avoid wherever possible. We sort of see it on a big scale, what happens when you have bare soil, but even in our own garden, we want to try and avoid bare patches of soil. And thirdly, digging less, basically. We've seen quite a lot about no dig, but the less you can dig, generally, the better your soil will be in terms of health. So let's have a look at organic matter to start off with. That's something that really excites me, because organic matter really is a sort of win-win in terms of improving your soil. Organic matter is anything that was once living. It's generally decaying plant matter. And what organic matter does is it acts like a sponge. So it really helps to sort of regulate levels of moisture in your soil. If you've got a really sandy soil, it will help the soil hold on to water and nutrients. But if you've got a really heavy clay soil, it will also help it to drain better. So it really helps to sort of regulate the sort of nutrient and water content in your soil. It also, you can see this little diagram we've got here. These little blue bits are the bits of organic matter, and then we've got the soil particles here. And ideally, we want those to bind together like breadcrumbs. If you think about like a sort of slice of bread is quite good at sort of absorbing moisture, but water will drain through it quite well also. And so that's how we want our soil particles. We want them stuck together in little sort of aggregates. So these bits of organic matter, they help to maintain a range of pore sizes as well, which allows water and nutrients to flow nicely through the soil. Also, absolutely vitally, organic matter provides food for biological life, which is really, really vital in terms of soil health. One of the best sources of organic matter is homemade compost. And this week, it's not only National Gardening Week, it's also National Compost Awareness Week as well. So it's a double whammy this week. Homemade compost is absolutely brilliant because it's something you can make on your own site. And we're going to talk a little bit, Monique's going to talk about that, how to make that a little bit later on. But it does all these things. It helps boost soil life. It helps improve your soil structure. It also has quite quick release nutrients as well, because we tend to put a lot of green matter into our compost. So it releases the nutrients at a sort of nice moderate pace that your plants can take up. So it's quite good to add this in the early spring so that your plants are there ready growing to take this stuff up. Obviously from a sort of environmental point of view, you're recycling waste and you're avoiding transport of bulky materials backwards and forwards in lorries as well. We want to avoid the use of peat as a soil conditioner for lots of reasons. It's sort of 2 main reasons. You're destroying a sort of irreparable habitat, so you have a lot of impact on the wildlife by digging up peat. It's a non-renewable resource, and also you're destroying a big sort of carbon store by digging up peat. Every time we drain a peat bog, we're turning something that was a carbon sink, something that was storing carbon, which was stored under those layers of water. Once you drain that, that turns into something that starts to emit carbon dioxide. It lets the cat out of the bag, basically, and you are starting to create something that is actually giving out carbon dioxide. So it's now estimated, this is work done by the RSPB, that our degraded peat lands are responsible for about 5% of our CO2 emissions. You might think that, well, only 5%, that's not too much, but actually that's actually more than all of our HGV vehicles put together, just coming from our degraded peat lands. So we want to really keep that peat in the ground. And nowadays, there's plenty of peat-free composts available. I think the sort of tide has really turned, even since last year. Last year, you went to a supermarket and you'd see most of the compost in the foyer would have peat in it. And the average person just takes a bag of compost and sticks it in their trolley. They probably don't think about it. This year, most of them are actually peat-free, which is really great, because it means most of the things that people are just dumping in their trolleys without thinking about it have not got peat in anymore. So that really is a step forward, I think. The organic matter helps to support life in the soil, and a staggering statistic is that 1 teaspoon of soil can hold more organisms than there are people on the planet. That's really quite a staggering statistic. And this soil life, it does lots of really sort of exciting things. It helps to break down some of this organic matter into substances that plants can then use. It's almost like a sort of digestive system within the soil. It's like almost like your stomach, the bugs in your stomach. It's breaking down all those sort of old leaves and stuff like that into sort of smaller substances like sugars and amino acids that the plants can take up, and various other nutrients as well. Also, lots of microorganisms do useful things. Some of them fix nitrogen, which is really, really important in terms from an environmental point of view. The manufacture of synthetic nitrogen really has a massive sort of global impact. It uses massive amounts of energy, whereas you can be getting these bacteria to do it for free. So that's a really important sort of environmental impact. Some of them also extend the root systems of plants. I'll show you some of those in just a moment. And then a lot of the bigger creatures help to maintain the soil structure. So let's have a look at a few of these. We've got the smallest ones, which are like bacteria and fungi, which are doing all the sort of useful chemical changes and processes. And then we've got larger things like sort of millipedes and earthworms, which are helping to maintain the soil structure. And then we've got these fantastic mycorrhizae, which are special fungi, which actually extend the root systems of plants. So on to number 2, our second tip. We want to avoid bare soil wherever possible. One of the reasons is if you've got a bare soil, when the rains sort of rain down on it, then it tends to glue it together into a sort of cap, especially once it dries out. And then this cap becomes impermeable to moisture. So the soil is no longer able to take up moisture so effectively. It either evaporates or runs off. And it also becomes impermeable to air as well. So your soil underneath can start to turn anaerobic, and that's usually bad news for all your sort of soil life under there. And also bare soil, all the sort of valuable nutrients that you've put in there, especially over the winter, the sort of mild wet winters we have, it tends to wash those nutrients out of the soil, especially if there's no plants to take those nutrients up, then those nutrients just get washed down into levels which the plants can no longer sort of access them, especially nitrogen. That's one that really is very soluble. It gets washed out very quickly. So some tips for avoiding bare soil. Cover with a sort of low nutrient mulch, such as leaf mold. You can make leaf mold very easily just out of dead leaves, stick it in a bag behind your shed for a couple of years, and that really will help to protect the surface of your soil. Also, you could grow a plant such as a green manure, sow it in autumn and leave it over the to grow over the winter period to protect your soil, and it will also help to prevent nutrients from being washed out. Often gardeners don't get round to sowing green manures, but it's a really useful thing to be doing to protect your soil. Have a look on our website. We've got lots and lots of information about green manures on there and how to grow them. Our third tip is digging less. So why do we want to avoid digging? Well, digging can damage the soil structure. I tend to think that soil biology is better at maintaining soil structure than churning it all up with a spade. Digging can also, because it stirs up the soil, it can encourage nutrient loss. It also helps to speed up the breakdown of organic matter, which is a carbon source, into carbon dioxide. So actually by digging, you're making your small contribution to climate change. So we want to try and avoid that. And lastly, digging from a practical point of view brings weed seeds up to the surface where they then germinate nicely. So you tend to have less of a problem once you sort of cut down on the digging. There's loads of information on no dig all over the internet. I can very quickly tell you what it is, but I think in my remaining 2.5 minutes, I'm not going to cover the whole of no dig. You're basically avoiding turning over the soil, and the principle is that you start off with like a cardboard barrier and a sort of quite a thick layer of organic matter, such as compost on the top, and the worms gradually take that down and mix it in. The cardboard sort of suppresses the weeds and starts to break down as well. You need quite a bit of compost in your first year, but after that you can just top it up with small amounts. So if you're thinking of converting to no dig, it's probably better to do it a little bit at a time rather than trying to do a whole football pitch. Just do a little bit of your garden and gradually work your way around and see how you get on with it. So yeah, I think it's quite a practical system. I do it in my own garden, and it's sort of working out pretty nicely. Yeah, it's just less work, basically, less weeding, less digging, and the plants looking pretty healthy for it. So further information is available on Garden Organics website. We've got a downloadable soil information pack on there. There's information on managing your soil. Got loads of information on growing green manures as well. We've got booklets you can download. We also have a really nice website at the bottom here called For Peat's Sake, which has loads of information on peat-free growing. There's even a little sort of online course that you can take. It takes about half an hour, but it's got lots of nice little interactive videos and quizzes and things. So yeah, have a go at it. So that's the end of my talk on soil. I think I've kept to time by the looks of things, and I look forward to answering any questions at the end.
Okay, thanks, Anton. That was absolutely fascinating. I think I'll never look at a spoonful of soil in the same way again after those statistics. They're amazing what we've got in our garden. Thank you. If you'd like to stop screen sharing, please, and we'll hand on to Jamie Normington, who's going to speak from Cumbria Wildlife Trust about biodiversity, habitat, nature recovery.
I'm not sure quite how to stop sharing my screen. There doesn't seem to be an option, but I'm sure that the next person will just override me, I think.
If
you look at the bottom of your controls, there's a green
screen, Anton. It should give you the option to stop. There's an arrow, I think.
I've got a green arrow, but it's not.
I'll just stop it here, I think. So
if you can just stop it there, because I don't seem to have the same. I don't have any controls at the bottom. Hooray! That's gone now.
Okay, so we'll hand on to Jamie. Thank you, and Jamie's from Cumbria Wildlife Trust.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining the session tonight. We've just got a short amount of time, and I think Anton did a brilliant job in covering the big stuff in 15 minutes. My interest is probably the smaller stuff. The big point today for me would be whether you have a hanging basket, a pot plant, or a garden of your own. There's a great deal of things that you can stop doing, which are really helpful, but there's also a few things you can start doing, which can make real big changes for wildlife and for the way you might enjoy your garden. I'm just going to try and share my screen just to show you a photo. I've been in my current property for about 10 years. I wasn't a keen gardener. I came from a typical garden that had been trashed by Alan Titchmarsh, in that it was covered in decking and hard surfacing and had unsuitable plants with no benefit to wildlife in. So it probably looked incredibly stylish at one point, but it had zero wildlife value. The only thing I used to be able to find in my garden down in Brighton were garden spiders, which are not worthless, but when all you can find are spiders, it's a pretty poor show, really. I never saw a bird in my garden. I certainly never saw a mammal of any description, nor any amphibians or reptiles, nor any other insects, because the spiders ate them all, I guess. So it was an interesting contrast for me to come to a village setting and have a little bit of space and be able to start learning just by trying things out. So if I share my screen now, can you see that, Nigel? Give me a thumbs up if that's working for you. Thank you. So I have tiny hands, and that's my hand. So this is where we start. What you can do, you can add water to a garden, whatever quantity you can add, whatever you can manage to look after. There's some brilliant things online which can help guide you, where you use a container, essentially. You can create a bucket pond, you can bury old Belfast sinks and upcycle various things. Obviously you need to think about where the water's going to run to. There's a little bit of construction to think around where the water runs off to, if it's going to make another part of your garden soggy, and possibly some of the plants will struggle if they're always wet. But adding water on any scale, I was lucky enough to have the space and a friend who volunteered to help dig a pond about as big as a bathtub in my garden. And it's not just about the things you might expect. This is something I hoped for, and certainly in March this year we were watching toads return to the garden pond. Often amphibians are really loyal to a site, so once you find them they're going to keep coming back, which is a really nice thing. But it's the surprises that things bring you. And if I change to my next photo, if you could let me know if this photo changes, Nigel, with a thumbs up. Has that worked okay? Or are we still looking at frogs? Right, okay. So what I'll do there is hopefully change to this picture. Is that a new picture, Nigel?
It is, thank you, Jamie.
Excellent. So this is June. This is June now. Now, this is also because of a pond. What people don't realise is by adding water, a huge number of insects actually have an aquatic stage of life. So there's an awful lot of pond life that we don't normally think of. But with a pond, as I say, about the size of a bathtub, within a couple of years, I had dragonflies hatching from the pond in the garden. And this was one morning I went out in June, sat outside and saw this happen right in front of me. That's the pebble dashing on the back of the house, the warm side of the house. So this little creature that you can see here is just one thing. It's crawled out of a pond across the grass, across the paving stones and up the back of the house. And then it's emerged from this shell that you can see. It's the shell of a dragonfly. I think this is a broad-bodied chaser that's hatched out. The wings are actually just inflating. They're not fully formed. I got to see those blow up like little airbags, really. And what's fascinating to me is that only moments before, what you can see there was inside the shell, which seems twice, or rather half the size of it. So pond life is not just about the amphibians that we might hope for and expect. It's about all the things we might not expect and the beautiful surprises you'll find. Dragonflies can live underwater for up to 3 years. It's a long game. But to find that they were in there, possibly they've been transported in by pond plants, was a really nice surprise for me. And certainly my friend, who was a dragonfly buff, was thrilled because he thought the pond may be too small for that kind of thing. So we've got that sense of what we can't see, what's underwater, but what we've provided in terms of changing the habitat. My garden was a lawn and a raised bed. Suddenly it's a lawn, a pond and a raised bed and a slightly wet area which favours certain flowers. So you can think differently about the flowers in your garden. And if you're interested in planting things, there are some brilliant, what they might call wet meadow plants, and you may know names, things like ragged robin, for example, as well as the actual water plants, the pond plants. You've just to watch for biosecurity, which means thinking about where you supply them from. You need a really reputable garden centre. Sadly, these days, a lot of the chain garden centres are arguably not that reputable. There's all sorts of problems involved with huge commercial gardening operations. So looking for family garden centres, particularly those with an aquatic specialist, can be really, really helpful to get proper advice about what might work in your location and what might avoid you bringing in problems from elsewhere when you move plants around and so on. I'd be very wary about taking things from the wild and adding them to your pond, because you may be transporting problems or bringing things in that can't work out in your site as they might have worked better in their original site. So the watery life is for me is the best thing you can add to a garden. Adding water, not just to grow things, but adding it as a habitat. The birds bathe in these ponds. All kinds of things. Actually, hedgehogs will drink there. The blackbirds will bathe in it. It's just everything needs water essentially. So I would start there. But in terms of things that we need to stop doing, we need to stop poisoning. Basically, all these very, very highly promoted products, which are essentially all poisonous. There's a real backlash now. You may have read some huge legal actions about some of the very well-known commercial poisons. Interesting, they're often shown with wildflowers on them, as if, you know, they're officially wildflower killers, out to kill things like dandelions. Dandelions being an essential early flower for queen bumblebees when they emerge. So these poisons are terrible, and they never truly go away. We're adding them to an environment. So I would say just stop using any form of poison. We know slug pellets are a terrible thing to introduce into food chains. They get into slugs, the slugs get into hedgehogs, the hedgehogs die because the poisons build up inside them. So slug pellets we've kind of learnt about, but actually the chemicals that people apply to greened paving stones, there are variations which are essentially more like vinegar rather than chemical based, that can help you remove algae from stones for safety reasons, but we're closer to a natural solution, I would suggest there. So thinking about removing those poisons, that's something we can stop doing. Another big thing we can stop doing, No Mow May is the name of this month, and no mow, you would essentially stop mowing. I never started this year. I don't start until maybe late summer, and I only cut the grass 2 to 3 times a year. In some ways, I'm mimicking what we may have done with traditional meadow management. And the thing that we're looking for there is actually all the things that may live in the grass that you've never given a chance to grow. I've definitely lost something here. I've lost daisies like short grass. So there is a different habitat around flowering lawns and short grasses and so on. Potentially with much longer lawns, you may lose some of the clovers and some of the shorter flowers potentially. So you might want to have a mix. If you have the space to have short, middle, longer grass, that can be a great thing. But with No Mow May, for me, the real tipping point was I used to cut a strip to walk on, and then I realised I'd swapped around. Actually, initially I only used to leave a strip long. Now I'm only cutting a single strip so I can walk to the washing line or the shed. And so for me, I actually don't waste time mowing. I don't waste energy or electricity mowing. My garden is full now of flowers that were always in the seed bank of the grasses. Several different types of grasses, and grasses can be very useful for butterflies. But critically, there's a butterfly called an orange tip. It lays its eggs on a flower called lady smock, which is showing very well at the moment, also known as cuckoo flower. You can find a tiny neon orange egg on there because that's the plant for the caterpillar. So it lays the egg where the food will be there for the caterpillar. So I've now got a garden full of flowers that didn't cost me anything, and I actually got them by doing nothing. So that would be my argument to stop mowing, stop using chemicals. We've heard about why we've just got to stop using peat. We're going to start by adding water, hopefully, in some way, and look at various ways of doing that, I would suggest. I would also start looking at your garden. Maybe start keeping a little diary or recording the things that you see. What I'll show you last of all is there are some terrific schemes. And for me, the item for me with the schemes that you can get involved in are to do with recording. These are always free schemes. There's the Big Garden Birdwatch with the RSPB. There's the Big Butterfly Count with Butterfly Conservation. These here are baby tree sparrows, but I would never have known if I hadn't learnt to look. So looking at what's actually in your garden and thinking about the things through the year can be a tremendous opportunity to learn about what you've changed in your garden, what you've started to notice. So start by looking, maybe recording. There are various forums online, perhaps groups, things like local natural history societies that can really help. There's a brilliant wildlife gardening website called Wild About Gardens. And the last thing that I wanted to show you was something that I'm currently working on, because as well as the climate crisis, which is actually top of everybody's agenda, or should be, in all honesty, at the very top of our list would be the biodiversity crisis. And I think the thing for us there with the biodiversity crisis is that we know what we're losing. There's a lot of people who record wildlife, who record habitats and see the changes in their own gardens. I think for me, the big issue is that some people have started to feel that all we're doing is recording loss. And what I would say is that there is a way of taking action. Most people ask us the question of what can I actually do? And obviously people have different restrictions on that. It could be access to things, it could be the resources or the finances to do things. But I would just say by taking an interest, you're taking a positive step. What you do with it beyond that is entirely up to you. And the last screen I wanted to show you, if I can, I'm just going to try one more time, is to do with a project that I'm working on called Planting for Pollinators. Now, the Planting for Pollinators project is the latest thing that we're working on from the wildlife trusts. Doesn't cost anything. It's working with 50 odd communities, but there's a fabulous website that I realise I'm possibly going to run out of time to discuss with you. But essentially, it's full of ideas that we can use to talk about ways in which we can improve our own local spaces beyond our gardens as well. You may well have access to parish spaces, green spaces, school yards, community groups. So there's a website here on the Cumbrian Wildlife Trust website. I'll add a link in the chat, which are all about the best plants for bees and pollinators. You may think a wildlife trust would argue solely for native wildflowers because there's good provenance, and in fact we're creating a wildflower nursery as we speak, growing thousands and thousands of plants to help sites around Cumbria. But again, it comes to scale. What can you do? What can you manage? What can you maintain? So there's a great long plant list here that can give you all the tips around things that you may find you've already got. You may find you've got the best things possible, but it may give you new ideas around night-scented flowers, thinking about the moths and the bats that are out at night. It may give you an idea about different habitats you may have in your garden. So I think for me, the idea that we're going to stop mowing, stop using peat, stop using chemicals, start taking notice, start trying to think of actions we can take. All the things that I've mentioned, you can probably achieve to some degree or another within your means and access, I would think. And actually, it's just a beautiful journey to kind of learn from. Great if you can join a gardening group, or if you can volunteer on a community garden and learn from others. But I'll add this link to the chat. And I think if anyone has any questions, I'm sure, as Anton mentioned, there's really good information on the website mentioned earlier. Monique will have more information for us too, and the Cumbria Wildlife Trust will follow up with some really good local information for everybody as well. So thank you very, very much for your time. I've just got a minute left. I realise there's time for questions at the end. And I just wanted to take the minute to say thank you very, very much for taking an interest in wildlife-friendly gardening. The birds, the insects, the incredible mammals that I found. I'm currently trying to track where the hedgehog has gone that's come to the garden. We've got good access from garden to garden here where I live. It's not all fenced in. There is a scheme called Hedgehog Street, which encourages people to knock little holes in fence panels and doors to allow hedgehogs to roam. But the absolute pinnacle that I'll mention, I discovered really because I was just taking time to look. I was actually washing dishes at the time and looked outside, and I noticed a stoat come out of my neighbour's roof, which really, really surprised me, because it wasn't where I would expect to see a stoat. It's where I'd actually expect to see jackdaw nests. So to think that we were living in a place that was so wildlife friendly, we were taking it to another level with a really great predator to see, in fact, and to learn that a stoat can actually walk up the wall of a pebble-dashed house was kind of interesting to me. So all this garden wildlife is around us, and all these opportunities are there for us to try and help and to encourage. Thank you very much for the time tonight to speak. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jamie. That was excellent. And I find it really interesting that so many of these things that are being recommended are saving us effort. So things like not digging or not cutting the grass, and also saving money because we're not using electricity and we're not having to go and buy flowers because they are there in the garden already, as Jamie's mentioned. So as they say, what's not to like really on some of these things. Thank you, Jamie. So I'm now going to hand on to Monique Speckschneider, who's also from Garden Organic, and I understand is a master composter. I think when I was going through the career service, master composting was never offered as an opportunity, but Monique's got a huge amount of experience to share with us. So I'll hand over to you, Monique, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for having us. I can actually attest to Jamie's plea for more water in the garden. When I was furloughed 2 years ago now, I dug a pond, and I had last year I had 7 frogs in my pond, and I was absolutely chuffed with that. Just to just to have that opportunity to see that wildlife coming into your garden by such an easy thing to do. Anyway, good evening. My name is Monique Speckschneider. I'm the project coordinator for the master composters in Cumbria here, and I'm going to talk to you about how easy it is to make compost. Because compost is the cornerstone of organic gardening, or should be of any gardening, I suppose. Why would you want to compost? It improves your garden for free. It adds fertility, as Anton already moved, and it improves the soil structure. It reduces the amount of waste being transported. Every compost bin diverts about 150 kilogram of green waste from being transported and processed, which actually, if it's done on a large scale, also produces a lot of methane, which is also a gas that leads to climate change. Homemade compost is a good alternative for peat-based compost. The composting basics. You have to think about, if you get a composting bin, you have to think about the position of your bin. The best position is to put it in a sunny position, because that will help the process by giving that just a little bit more warmth, and it's just a good way to position it. It will work in a shady position if you haven't got anywhere else to put them, but it will just take a little bit longer for the whole process to digest. You obviously need to add food, and I don't mean food in the sense of what we eat, but food for the bin, and I'll come back to that in a little bit, what that food might be. Sometimes you have to add water. To be honest, I never really add any water to my compost bin, but if it's really, really dry, you can add a bit of water, but normally enough water should be provided by the greens that you put in. You need air, and you can get air by turning it, and that doesn't mean that you have to turn it every week or anything like that, but if you can turn it occasionally, that is really helpful. But also things like adding egg boxes will provide pockets of air where all these creepy crawlers and microbes that are in your compost heap will work a little bit better. And you need heat. The heat will be generated by the processes itself, but also by the sun. So it's really important to get the mix right. About 50-50% greens and browns. Now, greens are high in nitrogen and moisture and rot down very quickly. Browns are high in carbon and will take a lot longer to compost down. The rule is basically, if your mix looks a little dry, you add greens. If it's a bit wet, you want to add some browns. And it's just a rule of thumb. Now, what are those browns? Here are some examples. So woody prunings, but make sure that you really got to trim it down to quite a small, to about this size. Autumn leaves, used kitchen paper. If there's a little bit of grease on it, that's not a problem. That will go in easily. Human or cat or dog hair you can add. Shredded paper, egg boxes are already mentioned, and cardboard is really good as well. You can also add wood ash, but please make sure you never add any ash from a coal fire, because that is very toxic and you don't want that on your compost bin. Greens are things like annual weeds, soft prunings, coffee grounds, grass mowings, and obviously your kitchen waste, your vegetable and fruit waste. With regard to grass mowings, I would say make sure that you don't add too much in one go, or if you do, make sure you mix it up with a bit of browns so that you don't get a whole layer of grass suddenly in your compost bin. You need to really mix it up, but you can do that easily by just, you know, giving it a good mix with some cardboard paper or some egg boxes if you have them handy. What shouldn't go in? Anything that might attract vermin. It's basically all cooked food, any meat, any dairy products, anything really. And this applies only if you have a normal compost bin. If you have a green Johanna or a hot bin, you can actually put these things in. Really thick woody material won't go in. Just put it in a corner in your garden and it will be used by all sorts of creeper crawlers and maybe bigger mammals as well. And you don't want any perennial weeds or plastics, obviously, in your rack, particularly tea bags. Most tea bags are now without plastic, but some are still do have plastic, so you don't want those in your compost bin. If you've got a lot of perennial weeds, it's an idea to put them in a bucket or a tub or something you've got, and put a lot of water on it, and you can drown it. It becomes a really sort of awful slimy mass, which once that's all watered down, you can just put on your compost bin as a little bit of extra green, so to speak. A compost bin is a complex food web. There's lots of creepy crawlers in there, but Anton already talked about this a lot, so I'm gonna skip over this. And I've got another picture of all these lovely bacteria and fungi that live in your soil, which I think is fascinating. We got lots of animals that can live in your compost bin. Obviously, worms are very important, but also centipedes, slugs, and snails, and fruit flies, and some larger wildlife sometimes. So there's lots of things that can enter your compost bin, and that's all just good, and they will do their job. When is the compost? How do you know when the compost is actually ready? Well, it basically looks like a nice crumbly soil, so to speak, just like a bag of compost you would buy in a garden center. I have 2 bins, and I think that's probably what the least you should have. You should at least have 2 bins. When one is full, I'll transfer it over into the other, and that's the only turning I do, to be honest. I'm very lazy. And then I just leave it, and by the time the next one is full again, usually that is finished. It takes between 6 and 12 months for a compost bin to actually get ready, but yeah, that should be plenty of time, obviously depending on your family size. If you've got a big garden, or if you've got a big family, then you might want a few more bins. Often we are asked, how do I actually get it out of the bin? Well, for me, the easiest way is just to remove the whole bin. Just lift it all off, and then you can easily just shovel it either straight onto the garden, which I do as a mulch, or you can put it into plastic bags you've saved from some other product you've bought in the past. And then you can use it, for instance, in potting mixes, or as a soil conditioner if you want to later. Yeah, a good way is actually, I think Anton also mentioned the way to actually compost leaves, to make that makes a really nice seed compost. Actually, it's really low in fertility, but you can also the leaf compost, you can also add that to your normal compost, and you get a really nice potting mix, which is great for potting on any sort of seedlings you might have. Now, our project is financed by the Cumbria County Council, and they currently have an offer. You can buy one of these Daleks, as they are called, these lovely bins, for only a tenner, and that includes it being sent to you. So if you want to start, go to getcomposting.com and you can order your bin, or better still, order 2. And then you are sorted. You can find more information, as Anton said, on Garden Organic UK. We also have a online course at the moment, which I'm going to put in the chat, which is, oh, hang on. Oh, wait, hang on. Sorry, I'm still sharing, am I? No, hang on. Let me stop sharing. Hang on. Right, here we go. I just need to copy this across. This is an online course, which you can just freely access. Hang on, I need to, everyone in the meeting, yeah. That's it. And you also need this password to get in. It's free to use. So please, you can share this as widely as you like within Cumbria, and it's for people to use. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have any questions.
Thank you, Monique. That was excellent. Interesting to hear about how to get started on home composting. Just before we come on to the questions, I'm just going to see if the technology will allow me to launch a very quick poll, just to see who's already home composting. We'll do a kind of straw poll if that's not a fun. I'll give you 30 seconds if anybody'd like to let me know what they're doing already. All the answers coming in, that's great.
Oh, that's really good to see. I'm really pleased with that. So that's good to know.
So hopefully everyone can see the results on screen now. So a large percentage of people, are 76%, are already composting for some time, which is great. I'm sure there's always, I don't know, we're composting and always trying to improve the mix of what we do, and there's others who are thinking about starting, and the recommendation you made about 10-pound compost bins is excellent, Monique, so no excuse for not getting started. Thank you. So at that point, I'm going to hand on to my colleague from Cumbria County Council, Tim Gale, who's the Programme Manager for the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership. And Tim's been very kindly keeping an eye on the chat this evening and fielding some of your questions coming in. And just for about 10 minutes, we're going to try and have a short panel discussion and put any of these questions to our experts, so Anton, Jamie and Monique. And if anybody wants to chip in on the answers in the chat, then feel free to do so. We'll answer as many as we can. So Tim, please.
Thanks very much, Nigel, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, as Nigel says, I'm Tim Gale. I'm the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership Manager. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Brilliant to see so many people with us. Particular thanks as well to Nigel for making this happen and organising it and getting us all here this evening. And thank you to Monique, Jamie and Anton as well for really brilliant presentations, some fantastic photos in there as well, really inspiring. So thank you very much for your time as well this evening, sharing that with us. It's generated some really good questions. I'm going to try and pick my way through them best I can in the short time we have. So I'm just going to go through some of the direct questions that have been asked, and hopefully we might get a response from one of our speakers, but please feel free, if there's not an answer to them directly from them, perhaps it might fall on one of us to help out. So the first question was, how do I dispose safely of slug pellets? Brilliant question. Can anyone help us with that one?
Hi Tim, it's Jamie.
Hello, Jamie.
Yeah, do you know they're such a hazard? This is not just coming from our kind of hedgehog-friendly point of view, but they are a dangerous poison. And certain types I think are actually banned now. So what I would say is, if you've got old packets of what were typically sold for gardens, if you've a local council household waste or recycling centre, they'll have a hazardous waste disposal in the same way that you can take, for example, an old car battery or something you're really not sure how to dispose of. So slug pellets or similar chemicals like that, it's probably best to try and take them to your local council recycling and waste centre, just to be safe, really.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jamie. I think that was what I had in my mind as well. I think that's probably the best bet. I know our local HWRC household waste recycling centre has been brilliant with a few questions I've had around things like that. So yeah, good luck with that one. Thank you. I think you've probably covered the next question I had on my list, which was around mowing, creating a wildflower meadow, and advice on whether to or how often to mow that. And I see, Jamie, you've responded. Thank you in the chat. So thank you for that one. It seems that we should be looking at a maximum of 3 cuts a year once it's established. So yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Brilliant question here. If anyone's got an answer to this, fantastic.
Sorry, can I just add
Yeah.
to what Jamie said on the meadows? I think it's really important if you want to have your meadow expand. You can actually regulate it by when you cut it. For instance, if you have yellow wattle in your hay meadow, you want to make sure that sets actually seed. Because if it doesn't set seed, there are annuals, and you will just lose them real quickly. So for instance, you need to wait until they've set seed and then mow it, because otherwise there's no point in having them at all.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Monique. Thanks very much. That's I think between those two answers, we've got that one well covered. So thank you both. The next one I had was a really interesting one around encouraging worms into the garden a little bit more, particularly from what Anton said about how important they are for our soil health, and a problem apparently with New Zealand flatworms, and maybe that maybe do they outcompete our earthworms perhaps? So how do we go about encouraging more earthworms?
One of the biggest problems we've had, Tim, and it's one of these things we've lived and learned from, really, the excitement over having new plants since Victorian times and bringing things from different places has also introduced what travels on the plants. So things like the New Zealand flatworm is often transported on plant pots and things that you might buy or take at a garden centre or a local plant fair and so on. So people often say it's the same principle of biosecurity on whether you're fishing or working on a farm. We need to extend that to the gardens, really, because once you've got New Zealand flatworm, there isn't really a way of ever getting rid of them, and that's a real problem, because they mess up your soil health. I think Anton may know something around that, but they also I think they predate on worms and other things. So there's a real issue about you introduce a problem completely unintentionally. And an interesting point on this is if you for example think you've caught all your flatworms and take them somewhere else, I think you've potentially caused an offence because you've moved something which is so hazardous. So it's a really nasty issue that we see replicated in plant diseases, but also in what we'd call invasive species. It's not a happy answer, I'm afraid, but it's just a way of understanding the scale of the problem, even on a domestic scale, is really quite unpleasant.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've more or less covered it, really. It's just trying not to introduce it in the first place. So just be really vigilant. Look underneath plant pots before that you bring them into your garden. That's the most important thing. In terms of increasing the numbers of worms in your soil, I mean, increasing the amount of organic matter is probably the best thing that you can do, and also reducing digging also will increase the numbers of worms. You can do a little the sort of standard test is to just dig a sort of 20 centimetre cube, and you should, under sort of moderate soil conditions, you should see at least 10 or 15 worms in that cube, and that's a good indication you've got healthy worm population.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, both Jamie and Anton. It reminds me of a session I did with a school group many years ago with Jamie, charming worms from the ground using tapping a garden fork in the ground. Yeah, never forget the look on the kids' faces when all the worms appeared. Brilliant stuff. Love it. The next question I have here is around compost bins. Maybe Monique could pick this one up. Are there a plastic-free alternative for composting?
Yes, you can easily make your own. You can use, for instance, untreated pellets to make often it's a 3-bay compost system if you've got the space. which is really easy. Just with a few screws and a few poles, you can put that together. I think there are guidelines on our websites, but otherwise you can also, you know, just use the old Google machine to find it, I'm sure. So that's an option. I would say that I don't think there's many plastic particles that come off a plastic compost bin. But I could see if you don't want to use plastic, that's obviously fair enough. But yeah, make your own. That's the best way to do it.
Great, thank you, Monique. I know I've tried that from using a couple of pallets that the farm next door was going to get rid of, and it's worked well so far. Thank you. Related to that, and again, perhaps one for you, Monique, was how do we keep very cute but probably unwanted visitors from visiting our compost bins, such as mice?
Mice, yeah, mice. Well, I don't think they are actually a problem. They are not really, you know, dangerous. I mean, if you have rats, that could really be a problem, of course. But mice are generally not really a problem. I mean, and if they nest into your compost bin, well, I suppose the only way to get rid of them is actually by turning it into the next compost bin. And but they probably will get in again. But I wouldn't worry too much about them. Just let them be. If you have rats, the only thing to do is really be really careful with your food waste. Don't put any meat or any sort of dairy or anything like that in. Even if you got, I've heard that people got rats into their green Johannas, although they are closed on the bottom. It's I don't know how to do it, but they apparently chew right through the plastic bins. So you really need to then not put any cooked food or meat or anything like that in your bins, and then hopefully they will go elsewhere. But yeah, once you've got rats, it's one of the biggest problems. There's really, well, I've been told there's not much you can do. Maybe Anton knows a great tip, but but,
I don't think I know any great tips. I mean, I've seen people put lots and lots of chicken wire around the bottoms, because most of the compost bins which say they're rat proof, a determined rat will eventually get in if they're very, very determined. They sort of deter the rats, but they don't stop them completely. I mean, in terms of mice, I would just say that often they like quite a nice, dry, warm place to stay. So perhaps try adding a few more green materials as well. It's sometimes I found that you're more likely to have mice nesting in there if your compost's on the dry side.
Great, thank you both. I have quite a good deterrent in my garden. It's a cat called Jack, who is very lazy, so he tends to favour the mice, which are easier than catching the birds, thankfully. So good job, he's a lazy cat. So we've got one more question, I think, time for just one more. And that was around eco-friendly weed killer, and one suggestion of using boiling water. But anyone else got any tried and tested methods for environmentally friendly weed killer?
There's the old discussion about what is a weed, which we won't have time for tonight. Yeah. But if it's some, there are injurious weeds, so called, which are still under debate because they're injurious in some ways and not in others. Actually, weeding by hand is the number one eco-friendly way to do it, which is just the old elbow grease. If people are able to, I've had to resign myself to some ground cover, which I would consider to be weeds here. But then I feel happier for doing so. So by not worrying about it is my kind of weed killing technique here, and just thinking that's fine, that can live there. It's not spreading any further, because otherwise you feel a little bit like Elmer Fudd, kind of always trying to catch the rabbit and never actually getting anywhere. There are various ideas that people use, various deterrents that people make out of things like vinegars and kind of garlic washers to keep slugs off things. They're all time consuming, they all cost money. So I would say weeding by hand, asking young relatives to help, bob a job week, come back, those kinds of things. It is hard, and I don't make light of the fact that, yes, there are certain things which are really problematic for people, but I would also look at what you consider as a weed, because for all you know, it might be the only flower that a particular kind of wildlife thrives on, and whether that's a thistle, And there's the birds eating the thistlehead seeds, or whether it's the dandelions, which drive some people to distraction, but as I say, are essential to early bumblebees, the queens coming out of hibernation. It's almost a question of put the physical work in or learn to live with them, I think, potentially.
Great, thank you, Jamie, and thank you to all of our speakers again for answering those great questions. So thanks very much. I'll hand back to you now, Nigel, just for any closing thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Tim, very much for managing the gardeners' question time. That's much appreciated. And also, obviously, a massive thanks to our panel of experts, Anton, Jamie and Monique, for all of the advice and experience that they brought to this evening. If I can just finish on a couple of points. First of all, what do we do next? Well, one great thing we can do is go and have conversations with our families and with our friends and our neighbours. Some of this is around culture and perception, and it's things like, for example, keeping grass long. People may look over the fence and think, why haven't you cut your grass? You're lazy, something like that. It's a matter of perception in neighbourhoods and keeping up appearances. So by having these conversations, I think we can start to change perceptions and ideas and maybe just shift the balance a little bit. And same with composting. It's great to see lots of people on this call already composting. We can all keep learning about composting, but also just talking to other people and trying to really build this in as a way of life effectively, because it is a huge benefit and it saves on waste and it all has all sorts of other benefits. And also just finally to mention, if you're really enthused, volunteering opportunities. So there are loads of organisations across Cumbria that are doing great things with nature, with wildlife, with climate emergency responses. And these are just some of those that would welcome volunteers with open arms. We've heard from Garden Organic and Cumbria Wildlife Trust, but there are lots of others as well that are doing all sorts of work, from practical things on conservation and tree planting and habitats and restoration of areas, through to things like education and engagement with visitors, even administration and office-based tasks, research, all sorts of opportunities there. So if you're keen, then I would really encourage you to go and look at some of these other organisations, and we'll send out a list along with some other information and resources after the event. So on that note, it's just my chance to say thank you again to everybody for joining and for interest in your questions, and I do hope you'll be able to join future events put on. So thank you very much.